First of all, I would like to thank you very much for the Greek Chamber of Architects, Attica section, for this invitation, for this provocation to be with you in this seminar, which I consider a very important seminar, and I regret I was not able to be there with you in person. Next time. Why this seminar is so important? Because in Greece, as everywhere in the planet, I would say right now, we are living in a housing crisis. It's a housing crisis in great proportions. It's a global process. It's everywhere, in the center of capitalism, but also in its peripheries. Of course, as any other global process, it's very different the way it expresses itself in each locality, in each region. And housing specifically is so embedded in the political economy of places. It's much more than places. It's much more than constructions. It's part of the fabric of life. So it's very important and it's very specific. But at the same time, we are living globally under the same pressures, under the same hegemony of a paradigm. And I would say, synthesize this paradigm as housing as a commodity, but more than that, housing as a financial asset. I know that I'm not telling anything new for you. You know very well in Greece, as people who live in Ireland, in UK, in US, in Spain, have known what was the result of a first phase of what we call the financialization of housing. Financialization of housing means to convert housing not as something which is a human need, of something that everybody must have access to in order to live in peace and security. Some place to call home, which is more than a house, 4 walls and a roof, but means also communities, means also a whole life being lived together. This was completely taken over by the idea that housing is a means for financial capital to be invested, to receive yield, to receive interest, to become bigger, and that, yes, a local, a park to financial surplus to park in order to receive more financial surplus, more capital in order to be bigger. And this is not new, of course, and the relationship between capital investment and housing is not something new in history, because of course you need a lot of resources in order to build homes. Yes, it's a big investment concentrated in time, but what is different now is housing as a vehicle, as something that capital can insert and pass and go away. And this was made possible not only because we have an immense mass of surplus capital who is floating over the planet looking for a place to park, but also because through neoliberal policies which became hegemonic in the planet, capital can move freely from place to place without any barrier. And it's not the same thing as with humans, of course not. But for capital, it's just a matter of a bit. Capital can move from one place to another, and more than that, the relationship between financial capital and built space became more entangled because of new instruments, I would say financial instruments, but also planning instruments that make possible for capital to enter and exit without having to do all the registry transactions, all the bureaucratic moves in order to pass from one property to the other property, from one hand to other hand. So I'm talking about real estate investment trusts and other figures and other instruments like that that make possible for investors to take yield and interest from specific built space without having to buy and sell it as a whole, as an entity. And that made capital to be very, very quick in order to do that, and more speculative. So what we had in the world as housing became one of the favorite spots to financial capital to arrive, to take interest. And the first phase that all of you know very well was a phase where the mantra in terms of policies, because nothing was done without an active role of the state, an active role of public policies promoting in the first phase that homeownership will be the solution for everybody. I know that the history of Greece, it's not a history of having a very strong public policy, housing public policy for all, like other countries, like Sweden or like France or like Britain. But nevertheless, the hegemony of the idea that everybody could lend and buy a home by credit, and with the credit could access home. And what happened, you know very well, what happened with subprime credits, with the failure of this model, and a lot of people that became with no homes, with no public policy, because that meant also the destruction of any other alternative, any public other alternative other than pushing towards indebtedness, pushing towards homeownership. But now we are witnessing, and in Greece this is very acute, I know, in some other countries as well, which is the second phase, which is financialization of rental housing. For capital, now the new wave, it's not only to promote housing through credit, but to promote multifamily schemes for corporate landlords and put them to rent. Part of the foreclosure stock, rental foreclosure stock, went to that. And the rental housing logic is working with fractions of time and not space, and making fractions of time and the expectation of receiving future flows of rental as a financial product that can be bought from one bank, from one asset manager to the other, in a way that rental prices are becoming more and more, are becoming higher and higher, more and more inaccessible, and together with that, new schemes as temporary housing like Airbnb, which is 100% financialization. Airbnb is a financial corporation that take out from the people renting parts of their homes of eventually some corporate people who owns several homes in order to put them to tourism or short rentals of digital nomads. And that is taking out from the residential stock, the places where people need to live, in order to put them for rent for these rental streams that can that can feed the need of capital to be bigger and bigger over the time. Of course, this taken over cannot be understood without our reaction against that. That's why we are having more and more tenants movements. We are having more and more tenants unions. We are having more and more those affected by those geographies of dispossession and banishment that are being created in the cities because we are just being expelled out from our cities because of these mechanisms. So organization, social movements, resistance to evictions, but also resistance and in order to insert and to introduce to the state regulations on rental markets, regulations or the impossibility of short-term rentals to be the landlords of our cities. All of that are creating also a very important force. And this force is the only possibility that we have in order to face and retake housing as a human right, housing as a human need, and the only way to really reaffirm housing as a human right, as a human need, is to cut the umbilical cord between housing and finance. And that is the task and the challenge for us in the next years, in the next decades. Thank you very much.